Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today. My name is Joshua Beasley, and I'm a librarian for Gwinnett County Public Library. Today, we're going to be talking about genealogy databases that are available through your Gwinnett County Public Library. Before we get into Ancestry or Heritage Quest, however, I'd like to talk to you about some genealogy basics and tips that'll help you along your journey when doing family research. Some things to think about when doing genealogy research is to begin with yourself. A lot of people make the mistake of going into our databases and jumping straight back to going, I, I really want to know more about my great great grandfather. And if you start to do that research without having laying the foundation first, it's really easy to get lost along the way. So, my first big tip is to begin with yourself. Think about all the names, dates, places that you already know or you can access easily through calling a relative. Um, and at this point, when you're doing that, it's also very important to gather oral history. Genealogy is a story, it's your family story. And the more details that you can get will help fill that story out and make it more interesting for the people that you want to pass that down to. While our databases are great resources, they can't tell you things like personality traits or likes and dislikes or those funny family stories that have been passed down. So, also while you're writing down dates and names, make sure to reach out to any living relatives, cousins, great aunts, and ask them about stories of your relatives. For example, if I'm trying to get my son, who's 9 years old, to be into family history, and I just start listing off, oh, your great uncle, he was born here, he died here, he lived in this place, he married this person, my son's eyes are going to glaze over very quickly. But if I can relate that story to my son, you know what? My mom used to tell me how my great uncle used to tell these big fishing tales, the giant whoppers, fantastical tales, and that reminds me so much of you when you talk about your video games. You're just like him. I might be able to hook him in with some interest there and get him into some of those finer details about his family's history. My last tip is not to get frustrated. Doing family research is really hard. It's like doing a jigsaw puzzle. And when you're almost done, you realize that you're missing some fairly big pieces. And that can kind of make the picture harder to see. So when you're doing research and you get stuck somewhere, and if you start to get irritated or mad or angry, take that time to just walk away from your research for a little while. Sometimes it helps to clear your head, and then back in about a week and come at it with a different angle. With that clear sight, it can really help you maybe overcome some of those research difficulties you were having. Now I want to tell you how to access our resources. First, you want to go to our website at gwinnettpl.org. Up in the top right, you'll see a tab that says Learn and Explore. Hover your mouse over that, and then go to Adult Digital Resources. From there, it's going to give you all the resources that we have at Gwinnett County. You can narrow those down dramatically by clicking on Genealogy. This will give you several resources that will help you do family research, but today we're going to mainly talk about two, Ancestry.com and Heritage Quest. Ancestry Library Edition is a resource that's provided by ProQuest and accessible through Galileo. Right now, it is available at home, but normally it's available only in the library. So you have to be either on one of our computers or connected to our Wi-Fi. But during the current reduced services, we have this service available through our website from home as well. Ancestry Library Edition is made up of over 7,000 databases and 200 billion images. I don't want you to take the image gallery for granted, because a lot of people think there's no way that they have pictures of my family. Who would upload them? Well, I'm going to get a little bit personal here, but a few years ago my father passed away. And while trying to look up his military information to discuss during his eulogy, I came across his 1971 yearbook photo from Georgia Tech. It wasn't something that I was looking for, and I didn't expect to find it, but at the time, it really meant the world to me. So if you get a chance, check out their image gallery. You may be surprised what you find there. Lastly, Ancestry is updated frequently, almost on a daily basis, by amateur historians and genealogists just like you and me. The first set of records I want to talk about are census records. Ancestry has census records for the United States from 1790 to 1940. They don't have anything past that due to privacy restrictions that are in place that require 72 years to pass before the U.S. government releases census records. So in a couple years, we should be getting the 1950 census records. When doing a census record search, I like to tell customers to start detailed. So you want to put as much information you know about that relative in there as you can. The reason I say this is because, especially if you have a fairly common name, say John White, for example, you're going to get 1,000,000 record sets back. But 999,999 of those results aren't going to be the relative you're looking for. So it's easier to scale back that information. If you put too much information in and you don't get the result you're looking for, you can slowly start taking information out until you can get the search record that you're looking for. Another thing to keep in mind when looking at census records is that they're not always accurate. Census records were taken by government officials that went door to door back in the day, essentially, and hand wrote a lot of this information down. So it's common that names could be misspelled. They could have the wrong ages. They could include people into your family that aren't actually a part of your family. So a lot of times census records keepers would assume that whoever was staying in that household was related to the head of house. This made it especially hard when doing my own family research, when a grandfather had a wrong last name listed on the census because his parents had passed away and he was staying with his aunt. So he assumed that he had the same last name as his aunt. And that made it a little difficult when trying to find my grandfather in the 1940 census. So that's where that foundation that I talked about earlier comes in really important. If I didn't have my aunt's last name written down in front of me, clearly available, I might have overlooked him when doing the census search. Census records carry a lot of great information. A lot of times they'll list the education level, the occupation, and the languages spoken of that individual. They also will often have the father's birthplace, the mother's birthplace, a lot of really valuable information. Again, keep in mind that this information is not always accurate. For example, languages spoken. In 1940, because of world events, your ancestor may have not wanted to disclose that they spoke fluent German. That doesn't mean that your ancestor didn't speak German. It just means they didn't tell the census record at the time that they could. And if you go back to the 1930 census, it may appear on that, where it didn't appear on the later census record. So you want to keep that foundational information that you have and just kind of double check everything that the census tells you. This is an example of a primary document One of the great things about Ancestry Library Edition is that for almost every one of their resources, they have the primary document available. Anytime that you come across one of these primary documents, I highly recommend that you download it or even print it out to keep a physical copy. It just really makes that history more visible or more real when you have the original document available. The other record I want to talk about are vital records. These include birth, marriage certificates, and death certificates. All your big life events. Another great thing about vital records is that they often have certified information. This means that the document had a witness to it. So at a marriage, there was someone that witnessed the marriage and signed off on it. Same with birth and death records. So a lot of the times, the vital record information is more accurate than information that you may find on for the census records, for example. They also can have street addresses available, which become very valuable when looking into your family's past and allows you to actually maybe take a physical trip to go see some of the places that your family lived or towns that they lived in. While our resources are great, not everything is available online yet. So that's something to keep in mind, where a physical address may really help you. You can go to the small town that your family lived in and maybe search local records there that are available at the city hall or in the church. One downside to vital records is that many of them may not exist. Vital records weren't standardized until the 1940s for the U.S. federal government. So each state had its own rules and regulations about what documents were required to be issued or what information was required to be on them. So they can change from state to state. Also, a lot of people that may have lived in rural areas may have never gotten a birth certificate, for example, or where that documentation was kept could have something could have happened to it over the years. You know, fires happen, floods happen, and information gets lost. So don't get too frustrated if you can't find the vital records that you're looking for. They may simply not exist, and that doesn't mean that your relative wasn't married to this person or wasn't born in a certain place. That just means the original documentation is no longer available. Ancestry also has great military records. These include things like draft enlistment records, pension records, casualty records, transportation records. There's just a vast amount of information available. Military records are also usually more accurate than some of the other information available as well, and contain great information like race, education level, occupation. They may even have like height and weight records, so you can go, oh well, that's why you're so tall. You know, your grandfather was very tall as well. The only piece of military record information that may be inaccurate, or at least is most commonly inaccurate, is the age. A lot of times young men lied about their age to be able to enlist early to serve their country. So you may want to double check that when comparing your notes to the records that you find here. Another great resource available through Ancestry are family trees. Family trees are created by their users, and it's a great way to get a jumping off point for your research. When you're looking through family trees, you may be able to find your relatives that someone else has done a lot of the legwork for because they happen to be cousins or distant aunt and uncles to that same person. So they may have done a lot of this research for you. The thing about family trees, though, is that they are created by amateurs. So you want to verify all of the information you find there versus your own, because what they may have recorded could be incorrect information from their oral histories that they've received. An example of this is, again, my grandfather. Um, he was listed on a lot of these family trees as having the wrong middle name. Because he signed everything with just his initial, they assumed it was a more common middle name than what his name actually was. So you want to verify that information with information that you actually know. Another thing that's a way to judge the validity of the information that this person has collected is by checking their sources. So you'll see on my slide where there's this sources tab. That means that for every piece of information that they've entered, they have found the primary document for. And the more of these primary documents that they've attached to this resource, the more accurate you can assume their information to be. One last tip about using Ancestry that I'd like to give you is accessing their research aids. From Ancestry, if you go up to the top right corner, there's a button that says Learning Center. This will give you research aids on a variety of topics, including how to research immigration records and ethnic guides for things like Native Americans or African American family research. They also have things for searching through religious records, which, depending on where your ancestors are from, may be the primary source of information that you can actually find documents through. So a lot of my own research has been amplified by going to these research aid area in the Learning Center. They also have things like daily tips that you can learn something new every day, and I try to check that out when I get a chance. The other database we're going to talk about today is Heritage Quest. Again, this is provided by ProQuest and accessible through Galileo. Unlike Ancestry, which is normally only accessible from the library itself, Heritage Quest is always available from home with your library card. The first resource I'd like to talk about through Heritage Quest are their historical maps. Their historical maps range from 1790 to 1920. And this could be one of the main reasons that you're having trouble finding things like census records or vital records for one of your relatives. Names change over time and borders are redrawn. So the place that you're typing in when you're doing that census search may have had a different name at that time. So you can pull up their historical maps and find the name that is accurate to the time period to better do your search with. And the example I've pulled up is the Georgia map, and I have it on the year 1820. The lines in dark black are the county lines at the time. You can also see the Indian lands with it, which I think is kind of fascinating as well. The white lines behind that also have the current county lines, so that's how you can tell where you thought they lived versus where that place is actually named during that time period. Heritage Quest also has a vast collection of historical books and directories. These include things like journals, written and oral histories, and local books. While they do have millions of these records, I have found, at least in my searching, that it is hard to find something that was actually written by your ancestor. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to at least search, because if you can find a journal or maybe even a local directory or a local history book about where your family member is from, that can be an invaluable resource when you're doing family histories. Heritage Quest also has expansive Revolutionary War records. Their pension records include things for disability, widow, and service, and their files that are from 1800 to 1900. They also have some other military records, but for those, I usually use Ancestry, as I think that the Ancestry has a larger resource to draw from. Now, I know that was a lot of information today, but I would like to tell you where to get some further assistance should you need it. For small, quick, easy answers to your questions, you can always contact our customer contact center through the phone number, which is 770-978-5154. We also have a chat service available through our website, and they can help you with some basic ancestry questions or heritage questions. For more in-depth service or in-depth questions, we also have a book librarian service. This is where a librarian will sit down with you for an hour and give you one-on-one help with your inquiries about some of our databases. Now, currently, because of the COVID-19 crisis, that service is unavailable. But we will be starting that service back up shortly with some social distancing recommendations in mind. So this may be a consultation over the computer or over the phone, or it may be in branch once those services resume, but spaced somewhat apart. So keep these services in mind if you need extra assistance when doing family research. Well, thank you all for attending my digital program today. I hope this is helpful. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Any of our librarians will be more than willing to help. Thank you.